Same thing. Okay. Oh, no. Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to do that, let's chase him and go. Yeah, okay. Go.
Might have that one already ready. It's like $8.
Small city. Don't tell us you got stuck in traffic. Yeah. Mhm. That's a long night.
Been waiting for.
Catch it.
We got that. That's why you would run.
It's too hot outside for that.
At 3:05, I call the special meeting and budget workshop of the governing body of the city of Blanco to order. Roll call.
Mayor Lundy,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Barron, present. Councilmember McClellan,
Ready?
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Fricko,
Here.
Councilmember Devine, present.
Thank you. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
Just, of the United States of America, and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to move on to announcements. I just have a few. I'm sure by now everybody has heard of the smoke rider fire at the Blanco Keys border. And the latest information that I have is that it's 60% contained. Anyone who's wanting to donate water or Gatorade can drop it off at the Gym of the Hills. Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. or on Sunday, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. The ESC auxiliary recommends avoiding going to the ESC2 station to allow our first responders to get some rest if they're able. Thank you to all the firefighters and emergency responders. We hope everyone remains safe during this time. Today is Thursday, which means it's trivia night over at the Redbud, so go check it out if you haven't already. Gym of the Hills will be hosting another Read Between the Lines event on Sunday, August 7th from 5:30 to 7. There will be a human trafficking awareness forum on Tuesday, August 9th at 8:30 a.m. by the Chamber for restaurant, lodging, and brewery distillery members. Lastly, if you haven't already, make sure to mark your calendars for a free community ice cream social, which will be on August 13th at Pinsville Park from 4 to 6. There will be live music by the El Verde Boys, and this event is hosted by the city and chamber. We are going to move on to public comments, and first we have Kenneth Flash.
Mayor, Council, Kenneth Welch, Blanco County resident, and I just want to speak with you for a couple minutes about the meeting held on the 281 corridor. First, I want to applaud you for having a meeting for 15 years. I've lived here for 15 years. I've been hearing rumors. It's finally good to hear that there is something going to happen. I think we all knew something was going to happen when we look at San Antonio and what's headed our way. There were people that left that meeting mad. There were people that left that meeting surprised. There were people that left that meeting concerned. Those are all very natural reactions. But after the meeting, I've been terribly disappointed because I've seen in the newspaper, I've seen on Facebook, I've seen walking around the street, a lot of people already slinging mud that somebody did something wrong or somebody hasn't done something right. And I just want to ask, I know you all intend, but you and I want everybody to hear and everyone in the public to understand that we're all in this together. We're all going to be impacted by whatever happens with 281. DOT is not going to stop. They're coming to Blanco. It's just a matter of what's it going to look like in town. So we're all in this together. We need to form alliances. We need to influence what DOT does. We're not going to stop. They're coming. Let's make it the best it can be for Blanco County, for the city of Blanco, and stop mudslinging now before it gets started, because we can be a powerful organization, whether it's an organization or a powerful group of people, to impact what this looks like. I don't know, some people will say it's a good thing that it's coming, some people will say it's bad, but whatever it is, we need to make it the best that it can be for those of us that live around here. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Susan Moore.
Mayor, City Council. I just want to address the bulk water situation that we have in the city of Blanco. I know that we're on a stage 3 drought notice, and Canyon Lake is on an emergency drought notice. So water usage, of course, is critical for the city of Blanco. I'm still seeing bulk water tanker trucks filling up early in the morning at the JP, right by the JP office. I think that the city needs to consider stopping all bulk water tanker sale at this time. I appreciate that.
Thank you. We are going to move on to presentations. Yes, I'm gonna just quickly rearrange the two presentations. So first we have Public Information District PID presentation by Bart Fowler and Craig Cummings.
Good afternoon, I'm Craig Cunningham, I'm with D.A. Davidson, I've been serving as the city's financial advisor, I think since about 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're here, my colleague Bart Fowler, who is the city's bond counsel, or in other words, he's the attorney that does all the paperwork. I'm the banker that helps get the lowest cost of money, so that's how we work together. What we're here today to do is discuss public improvement districts, or PIDs. You'll hear me use the acronym because it's easier to say that. This is not, we're not calling for any action. This is just an informational presentation about city potentially adopting a public improvement district policy such that if individuals wanted to apply for a PID within the city, there's guidelines there that you guys can apply to any such application. So PID is first and foremost the financing and development to it. Go to the second slide, please. Most of you have this. Development to available cities and counties, create the final area, corporate limits of the city, or through the purpose of the PID. Convey certain benefits on the landowners that they don't presently have. But in exchange for that, they agreed to assess or levy assessments against the homeowners in the district to help pay them back for the money that they borrowed to make the improvement. Next slide, please. So authorized types of improvements for public improvement district are listed up here. A number of them, we'll go over all of them. Sidewalk, streets, wastewater, parks. Obviously, these things must pay all of their expenses. In other words, any type of a PID plan, and we'll get into this a little bit later as presented to you, must cover all the city's costs in undertaking it, or why would you do it? If there's not some benefit to you, not only to pay for the staff time, but also some financial benefit of the PID in the city, that's what the policy is intended to do, help you make those decisions. But these are the types of things that dollars that are financed through the public improvement district can be used for. The next thing is I'm going to talk a little bit about a policy we provided you previously with a draft form of policy. And I'm going to let Bart talk a little bit more about that. Bart?
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Bart Fowler with the Call Partners Board of Pleasure Circle Bond Council. One thing as we go through this, I want to encourage you to ask questions as much as you need to. Maybe something I can answer, maybe something that Craig can answer better. And we're happy to just make this a conversation discussion with you to talk about kids. One of the things to keep in mind is Craig and I both represent the city. We're not here to advocate for a PID. We're just here to help understand what they are, what's done, what's been presented or considered in the area. And so we're just trying to help you understand what they are in terms of good or bad. We're certainly not taking a position on the current proposal. We just want to try and help move the process along so you understand what they are, because they are different. They can get complicated. The financing of them is very different than a typical public financing, whether you shoot an obligation bond or certificate obligation or revenue bond. They're just very, very different. So we're trying to get in front of this so you decide, put you in a better position to make decisions when the time is right. Craig obviously went over the first few slides, and I know a draft PID policy has been considered, and they're very common to see in Texas PID policy. Cities adopt them frequently. Help draft several for cities in the area. One of them was Water Vista, which is the basis of the form that was presented to you for consideration, or being presented for consideration. But they all cover basically the same types of things. One can be a maximum aggregate equivalent tax rate. Since the assessment is in addition to your city tax rate, people within the PID will pay your taxes plus the PID assessment for improvements within the PID. That it helps keep it off your tax base, benefit your tax rate, because the improvements, whether it's utility or road improvements within the PID, are being paid by owners within that defined area. But it is in addition to their taxes, so you have some sensitivity to make sure they're not paying too much, not being overburdened. Typically a $3 equivalent tax rate is the target. I've seen it higher than in some situations, higher, lower in others. And that's something for you to discuss and decide what you think would be appropriate to have as your policy if you decide to adopt a policy. Other these, city goals for development within an area for something you want, specifically you want to see in Blanco, you can require that to be done in PID development. Whether it's enhanced landscaping, beautification projects, park areas, things like that can be part of your requirements. Housing requirements for this workforce, first responders, veterans, providing housing for them. Sometimes that's something people like to see. Public space we talked about a little bit. The next point about city selection of your consulting team, that is entirely within your discretion. There are some developers that come in and they have some sort of a package deal. There's some convenience to that. They'll bring in people that can do the entire project for you. But there's some disadvantages to that as well. Obviously, you may want someone to be advocates for your interests. Craig and I obviously representing the city, and that's our role is to be advocates for the city. There's also groups out there that are PID administrators that they work on probably more the business side of a PID as opposed to the legal side that I do or the financing side that Craig does. And they also serve a role that they can help the city and be someone in the courts help determine whether it makes sense or not, and making sure the developers team is doing everything they committed to doing. And all those fees, whether it's mine, Craig's, or the consultant, the administrator, are paid by the PID itself. It's not a cost of the city. So people within the PID would pay those costs, cover those expenses. So you don't want to say it's free to the city, but the cost should be neutral to the city, so it doesn't affect your taxes or any sort of revenue stream you have, as paid entirely by the PID. The value of lien ratio is something that's been discussed quite a bit recently. There's been some adjustments. Underwriters typically, when they issue a bond or are going to underwrite a PID bond, you want to make sure there's a value on the ground to support the bond itself, so the bond's fully secured. 3-to-1 ratio, making sure there's basically 300% coverage on any debt services and the requirement. There's nuance to that, but for the policy, it's just standard 3-to-1 makes a lot of sense. But understand that sometimes developers come in and they have a reason why it should be a little bit lower. Usually, they don't always want it to be higher, but they want something a little bit lower. And there are good reasons to consider that. The 3-to-1 is probably a good starting point, as well as any other financing criteria you may want for bond issuance. And if we look at a PID policy, we can kind of point out where some of those items are for consideration. But just know there are a lot of these in the policy that you may want to tweak just to make sure that they're going to be financially suitable for you. Let's see the next slide, please. It's important to understand that PID is created by the city. It is a city area. It's not a separate political subdivision. It's not a developer's tool entirely. It is part of the city. The city's name will be on everything associated with the PID. It's a bit of an arm's length situation because even the city's name is on it. Since it's not part of your taxes, it is a separate assessment. There is some distinct components to it, but it's important to understand that the city council will create it. The city council will essentially be responsible for administering it. You can hire a third party to do that. And every year you have to approve a new service called a service assessment plan for the PID. So everything with the PID will run through you. Even the developers propose them, they're the ones that request them. It's to their benefit. It is a city's responsibility. This will be a city defined area that you have to kind of manage and maintain and control. Understand there's a lot of people who will help you do that. It will come back to the city council whenever anything gets done with the PID. So it is something that you're going to be on. It's important to remember.
Sure. When you say the city, their name's going to be in it, it's my understanding as far as liability goes to the bond holder. The city is identified and it's only secured by the land. Is that correct?
It's not the land. And I think this will be one of the other slides we have coming up. But it's not. There'll be indemnity provided by the developers usually to some extent. But I think what you're referring to is when you issue PID bonds, they're secured only by the assessments paid within the PID. Your taxes won't go to secure the bonds. Your revenue stream won't go to secure your utility system revenue won't secure these bonds. It'll be entirely secured by the assessments within the PID and nothing else. To make that very clear. So you are protected from that perspective. So if there's ever a default on payment of those PID bonds, the only source of revenue that you have would be the assessments paid within that PID itself. Your taxes wouldn't be hit, your revenue wouldn't be hit. So you have a lot of protection there. So I think that's where you're going.
I want you to go over it.
Yeah.
But I have other questions.
Something I'm trying to figure out if it never gets developed, those things never get purchased and you don't have anybody with it. If it doesn't happen.
The landowners within the PID are the ones that have to pay those assessments. And if they don't pay the assessments, you could have a default on those bonds. It wouldn't affect, we're told, and Craig can speak this better than I can, but we're told that rating agencies it wouldn't affect your credit rating, the city's credit rating, because they do something sustained. The one situation where I've heard it may, and Craig, I don't know if that out, so it's not about saying something wrong. But one situation where I've heard it may affect your credit rate is if you do it as a bad deal to begin with, you just, or Cal's didn't really care, it's like, let's just throw it out there and get it done, and it defaults. Then they said the city that it should beforehand, you should have known better than just do that deal to begin with. But if you go into something in good faith and it just happens to go bad, the economy tanks like it did in 2008, or maybe the recession's coming up in the future, just bad circumstances happen, then that shouldn't affect your credit rate. It should be protected.
I'll turn that, Mark, that what he said in the word Donnie uses, it's non-recourse to the city. The obligation of the pit is solely an obligation of those homeowners that live in the pit. It's non-recourse to the city in terms of them being able to come in and try and grab any of your money. Secondly, what Mark just said about when there's been abuses, those typically have happened in the absence of a formal pit policy, maybe even being in place. And so there wasn't something to go back and hold someone accountable to say, well, your policy said this, but you went ahead and did that. So I wouldn't suggest that it doesn't happen often, but it has, but it's typically in situations where you haven't had good advisors come in and work with you to put policy. Does
And
that make sense?
it does, I think that where I'm stuck is the chicken egg, in that, so we look at this and it looks great, and you keep talking about the homeowners. What if there are no homeowners? That's the recession. So either we put this in place and the development starts and it all stops because the economy's tanked. How does that money flow? Once the bond is done, or they build it and halfway it's built and sales are underway, and then people stop buying or they default. I'm trying to understand if it goes away or it
You're-
stalls. What happens?
Now, it's a good question, and you're always gonna have a landowner that starts off usually the developer, develop land. And if it's time the assessments are levied, they're responsible for making those assessment payments and secured bonds.
Okay.
If they sell some homes, not the rest, then those homeowners would pay their assessment, but the developer, whoever owns the land would be responsible for the remaining piece.
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt again.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm a homeowner and I just,
Counselor, just make sure your mics are on. I know. It's not.
It's
all right, if let's say the first homeowner buys a lot and there, is his liability limited or is it unlimited liability on the entire note?
It's limited, there's an assessment on each parcel, on each lot.
Okay.
So you'll have an entire assessment levy on the entire area, entire geographic boundaries of the bid,
Right.
but each homeowner will just have a portion.
So that homeowner would be protected.
Yes, they'd be responsible for their assessment. You know,
Right.
maybe if it's a $30,000 assessment pay over 30 years, it'll be $1,000 a year. It'll be, that's the assessment.
Right.
It'll be different.
So that homeowner's not at risk if the developer was to fail.
Correct.
Okay.
They're responsible for their assessment, that $30,000 paid
Right.
annually, or $1,000 annually, whatever the number is be. But that's all they'd be responsible for.
All right, thank you.
One thing we'll talk about since we're going in, and we'll skip over these slides later, I won't repeat myself too much. But there's a very secure lien on that as well. So it's just after taxes. It's not the equivalent of tax lien, but it'll be for their mortgage homestead as well. So if you have a lot of security to go in and ensure that someone makes their payments, or you take the land from them. So you have a lot of things in place to make sure people can make those payments. If they can't, then foreclosure is an option, not a good option. No one wants to
So
do
whether
that.
the bond priority over the mortgage.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
Along the same lines, the reason I keep emphasizing the city's name is on this. If the developer didn't pay or a bunch of homeowners decided to pay and defaulted on a bond, the city's name is still on that bond. So the reputational risk, reputational damage potentially that could occur, but financial obligation, financial damage and liability would be limited to just the assessment paid within the bid. But your name's still on it. Nobody wants to have anything associated with a bad deal. That's why to make sure you do your diligence up front to make sure you avoid that situation. But to me, that's the biggest negative.
Well, that
Reputation.
goes back to your 3-to-1.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can potentially sell the land and make the payments.
Right.
Right, that's right. Let's see, I think the next slide. The PID assessments, which we already talked about a little bit, they are levied by the city council, something that you do. And as mentioned, it's reported to property taxes, but senior to other liens. And the assessments, this last bullet point's fairly minor, but it's worth understanding. The assessments aren't just paying for the infrastructure and the debt service on the bonds. There are other things that are paid annually, whether it's administrative expenses, administrative costs. Make sure the city doesn't put that there. The PID, keep the lender within the PID, we must pay for that. So the actual assessments will include the debt service on the bonds, administrative expenses, operation maintenance expenses, or to the extent there are any, as well as some reserve funds that need to be set up to secure this type of debt. You'll get more information about that if you do a PID and issue bonds for them. It'll be outlined very clearly about what those costs are. And every year we'll come back to you to make sure that you're familiar with it, know what's going on, because the administrative costs, O&M costs can be different in what you're doing. Usually not significantly. We're talking about just a few dollars, not a huge amount, but they can change a little bit from year to year. That service won't change. We'll know that up front. That'll be locked in for the life of the PID. Some of these other costs may go up and down just slightly. Some things that we're going to have throughout the year. We may have to replace something with the PID. You know, some of these items have to replace it a little extra extent, that type of thing. Let's see the next slide. The service and assessment plan. I've mentioned this briefly. This is the service and assessment plan really is something that outlines what the PID will do for the landowners, homeowners within the PID. It'll outline what the improvements are going to be, what the costs to the homeowner are going to be. There's an assessment role that's attached to the service and assessment plan that outlines what the expense is going to be for each parcel within a PID. So when a homeowner buys a piece of land, build a home within the PID, they'll get the assessment role that tells them they bought this parcel and here's exactly what the amount they will own is. And it'll be a lot small amount. It'll be a large dollar amount. This takes over usually 25 to 30, 35 years. But they'll get notice of that through the proceed the service and assessment plan. There are laws in place that require you to give them that notice. So any homeowner will receive that. And the service and assessment plan will memorialize that. And again, it comes to you once a year to make sure that you know what's going on, and what's money to for approval and adoption by ordinance now. It has to be done by ordinance pursuant to state law. But it's something you'll see at the beginning as well as annually after that. Let's see. I think we can go to the next slide. PID administration, we've already talked about this, so I probably won't spend too much time on it. It is a responsibility of the city to administer the PID, but there are third parties to do that. I know Craig worked with several, I worked with several as well. We can certainly give you names to the people that will do that, and their cost is paid by the PID. It's not paid by the city, it's paid by landowners in the PID, so their cost is covered again. And they can help manage that and make it a lot easier for the city. We can probably talk to you about it at length at some other time, but administering it yourself can be very challenging. There's a lot that goes into it. Preparing that service assessment plan is a lot of work. It's a big undertaking, especially if you're doing it kind of as a one-off once a year or so. PID administrators do it on a regular basis. It's their daily work, and they do it. And the cost, their fees for doing that type of work spread out over the PID is every cost is important, but it's really not that significant. And they probably do a less expensive job than the city had to hire someone yourself to do it. I'm not sure if you can encourage an administrator, but
Is these, as far as, just like you hire third-party city attorney to advise you on legal matters, you hire third-party financial advisor to advise you on financial and borrowing matters. We hire a third-party administrator because that's what they do all day long, is administer PIDs. And so they get the service plan, they get the assessment plan that has to be adopted by ordinance, they'll bring it in. That's their job, to provide that to you each year. Another thing that they get to, they also require signage outside the divisions now, so that if you're entering into the division and even look at a house, they'll have a sign that says, this is part of a public improvement district. And vehicle curves and other, and the owners are required to inform people as they're coming in to look, this is in an improvement district, and that you will have an assessment. So it's very, very well disclosed, if you will.
that's a good point. And one other thing that we were speaking about, that when those signs are up, people obviously they've been given notice that they're within a PID, but still, when anyone buys a home, you don't always pay attention to what taxes are going to be, or what assessments are going to be, or what are the costs go into that. And when people receive their tax bill, they may get talk to their neighbor, someone lives a mile away, and they see they have an additional assessment that someone else doesn't have. And so the city's gonna get phone calls about that, typically every year. What questions about it, they're not always happy when they're paying more than someone else they knew. And another advantage of the administrator, they deal with those situations as well. So when you get those phone calls into the city, you refer them to your PID administrator, and they can help manage that and educate the people within a PID. If they, even though that's not a document receiving notice at closing on a home purchase, there's a lot of things like that, including getting my bought, I don't always pay attention to all of that. And so you need some education through the years, and your PID administrator can help with that, take that burden off the city. So for dealing with complaints or questions, you refer all those to your PID administrator, and they can do that for you. The last point on here, that I will note this, I mentioned foreclosure if someone never did not pay their PID assessment. Then it will be the city's responsibility, just like it is someone who doesn't pay their taxes. It's the same situation, same process. If someone's not paying their assessment, they're probably not paying their taxes either. So they typically go hand in hand, but foreclosure is a serious subject, and so it's worth noting or remembering that it is the city's responsibility if something happens. It wouldn't be the developer, it wouldn't be anyone else, but come back to the city to initiate those foreclosure proceedings. Let's see the next slide. Yeah, two different types of, there are probably a few different typical uses of PID. One is raw land development, and this is often for residential development where a developer wants to develop a piece of land with homes, maybe some commercial, but typically residential. And they want the PID to help finance those costs, cover some of their costs for it. It's often a good idea in your PID policy if you want to require the developer to have some equity in it as well. They're not going to get reimbursed 100%, but they have some percentage they want to reimburse for their infrastructure. That's all I to talk about. But the second bullet point under the first main heading is an important thing to keep in mind. There are two different ways that people, communities in Texas have used PIDs. One is upfront cost. They're paying for construction costs. You issue a bond based on raw land for construction or any sort of infrastructure to put in place. And those bond proceeds are received, the developer uses that money, takes your draws monthly, periodically, to pay for the construction as it goes on. There's more risk involved with that when you want to make sure you're with the developer that knows what they're doing. They have good backing. They can actually produce a project. And so there are reasons you may want to do that, but oftentimes with the first time developer in the city, if you don't have a relationship with someone, what I've seen is cities require the developer to put the infrastructure in first, show that they can produce something, and they get reimbursed. The bond comes after the infrastructure is put in. That doesn't always work for every development. Sometimes they need the money up front to fund it, and if you can get comfortable doing it that way, that's no problem. But if you're not comfortable and you want to require someone to actually show they put the infrastructure in first, with the roads, the utility system, even if they haven't sold a home yet, show that they can put some stuff in the ground first, and then you issue a bond to reimburse them. And at that point, you're more or less acquiring infrastructure as opposed to funding the construction of it, and we've lost security there. At that point, the development doesn't occur. The city still at least has an asset in the ground that development could occur at some point in the future. Not the situation you want to be in, but it's better than just raw land with nothing on it. You got to help on this issue.
Okay, I want to ask you another question.
Sure.
Real quick. When the infrastructure is going in, and it's, I guess at that point in time, the property has been platted.
Mhm.
And so there are right of ways within that property and they're owned by the city. Do you not require the contractors working for the developer to provide the performance and payment bond according to state statute?
There'll be a financing agreement as well as an acquisition reimbursement agreement. I don't even know all the agreements we have in place. There's a lot of contracts will be executed to ensure all that occurs.
Yeah, well, that kind of indemnify, this other part of it versus letting them complete all of it first.
Say that again.
I said that would somewhat indemnify us if your contractor's got a, fixed price
Yeah.
performance and payment bond on the project by an approved bonding company. Then at that point in time, you can make progressive draws, being assured that the materials have been paid for and it'll be completed in that contract price.
That's exactly right. And one thing I've seen is you often ask for what we call fiscal surety. If they're going to have assessments for, I'm going to say 50% of the infrastructure, it'll be more than 90% of what they ask for. But if you're only issuing bonds to fund the construction of half of what the expected cost, you're going to want to see them either put up cash, either escrow or a letter of credit or some sort of fiscal surety to make sure that other 50% is covered. Now, you're talking about some performance bonds, I think, from contractors.
I'm talking about the third tier contractors that work for
And
them.
we get all that in place, but we want to make sure that there's enough expected to be there, the bonds, whatever you may issue for bid bond, plus what the developer can put up, whether it's through cash or whatever credit. Sometimes we'll use a completion agreement to, if they have enough.
Well, can you have the developer bond his portion of it?
You could, we want to make sure we know what that looks like, make sure Craig's comfortable with it as well, that we think there's enough in place to give you that comfort. But yes,
Right.
all that is done pursuant to the financing agreement. And that will be entered into before you ever levy assessment, issue bond, and to make sure all that is covered.
All right.
There's always some risk. I mean, you never button everything up entirely, but we do button things up as best we can to anticipate those situations. So it's all done upfront before you ever levy assessment, issue bonds. Ideally, the fancy rate can be in place at the time you create it, so you just know what's going on. But those are all the types of things that we covered.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything to add on that? I don't want to.
No, I think that's actually a great question, is that, having the appropriate, policy in place, and it's addressed in the policy draft we provided, is how developers have to, contract with contractors, put in those improvements, and payment performance bonds would be part of that. So that was a really good question.
And I'll say that I think every developer that I've worked on a bid with, they expect that to be in the agreement. They know that's part of the deal. If we're going to get a bid, they're going to get this incentive from the city. They expect to do that. So there's some negotiation. They obviously want to do have more flexibility, do a little less than what you guys may ask for. So there's some back and forth on those types of questions, but they expect that to be part of the deal.
Okay.
And this is all under the financial limitations and performance standards of the policy. Okay.
The next item of commercial improvements, the next use of a PID. I'll just mention this one so you know there are other types of PIDs out there. There's actually a PID that's created over downtown Austin. And obviously that's not all. Those buildings have been there for a long time. And in that case, the owners of the commercial properties in downtown Austin wanted the PID in place more for beautification projects, provide additional security at nights, downtown Austin, busy on the weekends, at night. And so they wanted to enhance security. And so they created a PID that essentially just provided operations and maintenance type functions. So they can have the people that pick up trash, keep it cleaner, additional security instead of police, like I said, that type of thing. So there is another use for PIDs out there. They also improve and enhance some of the parks that are downtown Austin. And that was requested by the home, the property owner, because big commercial buildings down there. Outside of Austin, I know some other cities, medium-sized cities have considered those types of PIDs, but there aren't a whole lot of those out there. But they do exist. Just to be comprehensive, like there is another type of PID use besides just land development. Let's see, the next slide, I think, talks about the PID bond issuance. We've already covered a handful of these as well. Special obligations secured only by PID assessments. I think we talked about that. Let's see. The city does receive the assessments, but the assessments themselves will be held by a trustee. They won't go to the city, and that trustee will hold those pursuant to an indenture of trust for the benefit of the bondholders. So the assessment payments will go not to the city, but will go to a trustee bank that will hold those to make sure that the PID bonds are fully secured. And even though the city's name is on the bonds, negative activity associated with the PID bonds it shouldn't come back on the city other than that reputational risk we talked about a little bit. Let's see. I believe that's it for this slide. You can go on to the next. Similar obligations, what the city is required to do under an indenture. You have to, and I think every one of these outside of the foreclosure proceedings is something that the PID administrator will handle for you. You decide to hire a PID administrator. But they have to send notice of the assessments to the landowner. They'll receive that at the time they purchase the home or a lot within the PID. They'll collect the assessments, make sure the trustee gets them. And taking legal action to enforce the foreclosure proceedings, again, that's the city's responsibility. So that's one action you would have to take. You could rely on your PID administrator to do that. Although they'll come to you and explain what someone didn't pay their assessment, why it happened, and what action you made you take to help either try and remedy that or report claims. And yeah, last one is just a third-party PID administrator is in place to help take care of all that for you, so that you don't have to burden your own staff with that. Let's see, the next slide, I believe, is the very last one. For next last one, for just some contact information for us. If you choose, next step would be to direct staff to create a PID policy. You already have a draft of that, something to consider in front of you. Happy to talk about that further, but that would be the next step. What some cities do when you're considering a PID policy, you may have a moratorium on accepting new PID petitions. I think I may have glossed over it, but the process for creating the PID, a developer will come in with a PID petition, they'll present to you. You have to act on that petition to create the PID or not create the PID. But if you're looking at adopting a PID policy, you may want to have a moratorium on accepting any PID petition while you go through that process. Get the policy in place, and then if someone submits a petition, they'll know it has to comply with the policy. Or if you're going to request a variance of some sort, that'll be part of the petition as well. You know all that up front. So let's say after the PID policy is implemented, the creation process can begin, and that requires publication of notice of creation and hold a public hearing. Those are documents and notices that I will help draft, will draft for you. We'll get those published. The hearing itself is usually fairly routine. So long as the developer, the sole landowner within PID, there's usually no objection because they're the only landowner, the only person has standing to comment on the PID. But you have to hold a hearing. You have to mail notice of the creation and hearing to all lenders within the PID. Typically, that's just one single developer. Sometimes they have different entities to give that notice to. And again, I'll work with the developers team to make sure those are prepared and sent. So it's nothing for the city to have to work on. Then you can obviously hold a hearing for creation of the PID, take action following the hearing to actually create the PID. And these agreements we talked about, development agreement, service assessment plan, financing agreement. There's also an acquisition and reimbursement agreement that developers would request to make sure they get reimbursed for the infrastructure. Block agreements will come back to you for approval. You'll see all that ahead of time. We'll be back to answer questions, go over the documents as much as you like. But those are the types of things that you'll see along with the creation process. That's a very quick, high-level overview. There's a lot more we get into this that can be difficult. The first head I worked on several years ago, we've learned a lot since then. I'll put it that way. The developers are always asking for something new, something different. Every PID is unique, has its own specific circumstances where what we did a couple years ago may be different today. But again, that's what we're here to try and help and guide through that process because they can be. This last slide has my information and Craig's information as well, our contact information. So please hang on to that. Feel free to call, email with any questions you may have. If you have any questions, Craig and I are here to help answer those as best we can. We talk about the policy. I'm not sure if you have anything else to add as a summary, but we're certainly happy to do anything that you're.
I have a question. At what point in this process does annexation of the PID take place? I'm assuming this PID eventually will be annexed by the city.
And that's usually a discussion up front. I don't know if it's be part of the petition or part of your creation. It could be in one of the agreements that we talked about. There may be some ways to define or clarify and confirm what's going to happen with annexation in there. But those discussions happen immediately. Once you receive a PID petition, it's something you have in your PID policy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the way we drafted the PID policy is that the owner would have to agree to have their land annexed into the city. And depending on what timing is, that might be negotiable, but I believe the policy provides obligations under. For some, there's time for options, but for your community, I thought it was better to have it as a requirement.
We do, there is some language that sort of needs to be taken out because under the preferential treatment of PIDs, it says preference will be given to projects within the ETJ that voluntarily annex, but the requirement says you will be annexed. So we could get rid of this because there is no, if they agree, they're going to.
We received some comments from your council on the PID already, and we would make those changes before we.
I'm curious, I have two questions, if I may. One, the minimum size for a pit, is there a reason economically that there should be a minimum size? I'm curious as to why that's.
There are, and you people answered that, it's, at some point, it can be so small that it's not worth going through the hassle of the expense, because costs are expensive, pits are more expensive than a typical debt financing or anything else. And at some point, it's just so small, it's not worth your time, frankly.
And the owners will typically reach that conclusion on their own because they still have to invest their own money just to get an application ready, just to put it in place. And so there's kind of the law of diminishing returns applies in terms of how big of an ask are we versus the amount. So it tends to manage itself some. That's not to say we aren't here to help with that, but typically you won't get them if they're not economically viable.
There was a blank on the policy, that a minimum of blank acres, and so I was wondering, are we supposed to fill that in? And if so, what would be the consideration for that?
And I think that was probably there for discussion.
Okay.
Frank just
Right,
mentioned-
and it can be to the discretion of the council, it could be some minimal number, we can certainly work with it.
And I have one other question, I'm sorry, I don't know what a SAP is, what's an SAP?
That's the service and assessment plan.
Service
SAP,
and says,
yeah.
oh, thank you, I didn't know where that was, I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, we shouldn't use that when we're up there, but that's what that is, that's
Thank
the
We
event assessment plan we discussed.
we have a tendency to carry with acronyms, and we should explain that.
That's it.
I'm sorry, I have a mechanical question, you probably know with you, Craig. As we're going through, we're getting 21 audits after your meeting, we're going to talk about that, and hopefully next week we'll have it through. Talk about doing bonds and helping pay for this. What does the city actually have to do as far as bond requirements, as far as our bond rate, or does that not?
That does not apply, a great question, Mr. Escovy. These are non-recourse, as I said earlier, non-recourse obligations to the city that you are simply what we would call in this maybe a conduit issuer. And what that means is you're facilitating the issuance of tax exempt bonds by a private party in this case, an owner of a developer. And so by the city sponsoring it, it allows those bonds to be issued at tax exempt rates. If the owner went out himself, separate from having a PIN, he would have to borrow at taxable rates. So one of the benefits to having a city sponsor is that it allows him to access cheaper money. But it would have it might talk a little bit about where the city is located, what your economic base is and all those things, but it would not include any financial information about the city. And it would clearly state in any offering document that this is non-recourse and is typically in big capitalized bold letters in multiple places in our offering documents that we state that. And then quite honestly, investors understand that. But that was a great question.
Any other questions?
I think I've got one more, whose responsibility, I guess it's the city's responsibility to properly vet the developer. Is that correct? Are there services that assist us for that?
Yes.
That is often the administrator, they're familiar with, most of the ones I've worked with, all of them, familiar with developers around the state, and they'll vet them like, their experience working with a particular developer or with someone who hasn't done this before, they'll know that as well, and kind of working with financials to make sure that.
Right. But
But there are.
it's not that we will have our administrator do that portion of the work.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another third party job of that.
Right.
Administrator. Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to the presentation from Belt Harris Pahache, LLLP for the fiscal year 2020-2021 audit.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm serious. There's no questions that we're not willing to answer. So anything comes up, please let us know.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. And if you'll notice on your agenda, Ben Hogan was doing the presentation and I'm not Ben. I'm Darda here, and so I'll present your annual audit for you. I did not do the audit, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. If you'll flip with me to page 1, you'll notice you have 2 books, so we're going to be looking at the larger of the 2 books. The second smaller one, it has to do with the single audit. So if you flip with me to page 1, you've received an unmodified opinion. That's basically what this page is. That it is, and we consider that the most important page out of the audit, that you received that unmodified opinion. So all the disclosures have been made in your audit, and everything that's materially correct is according to generally accepted accounting principles. So great job on that. All right, so we're going to flip over to page 25. Take a look at your revenues and expenditures for the year. Total revenues. Make sure everybody gets there. Page 25. Okay. And we're looking at that general fund column. Your total revenues, $1,486,646. Total expenditures, $1,921,367. You have some other financing sources and uses, putting a little revenue back in there. So you'll see that net change in fund balance. You had a use of fund balance of $352,037, leaving you with an ending fund balance of $1,072,759. So one of the things that we look at when we go through the audit is what that fund balance is sitting at. So we basically say that a minimum amount that we would want to see there is somewhere between 25-30%, given a city approximately 3 months of operating capital in that fund balance. You're sitting at about 55%, so nice, healthy fund balance. So I just wanted to point that out on fund balance. All right, we'll flip over to page 59 and look at your budget. So we basically look at the original and the final budget. We compare it to actual. So looking at and we really like to focus in on those expenditures. That's the part that we're looking at to see whether they had the appropriate amount budgeted for those amounts. So if you'll see on your final budget, you had $2,096,333 budgeted, but you only spent $1,921,367. So you came in under budget of $174,966. So great job on meeting the goals set forth on the budget. Now, those are the 3 most important pages out of the audit. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. The other book that we have is a single audit. Along with that, you had a bond this year with the Texas Water Board. So anytime a city has expenditures of $750,000, it triggers a single audit. So in what goes hand in hand with that bond is those were federal funds. So that ended up coming back. So that's the reason that you ended up with a single audit this year. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
None yet.
And if you start looking for the information on the debt and from that bond, I'll let you flip over and look at that part. It was on page 45. Yeah, 44 and 45 basically is showing your capital assets for those improvements. And then on 45, we've got the government and the business type activities where it's, so you'll see that, that private placement certificate of obligation on it.
Where do we stand percentage wise or debt wise to comparable cities, with a budget of the same as ours and our debt?
I don't have that information in front of me as far as doing a comparison to what your the other amounts are. The few cities that I have done, one of them actually has a PID, real similar to y'all. There was a smaller town on the outside of Houston, and but anyway, but I would say probably bond wise, y'all are pretty comparable.
Would you verify that for us, please?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, can y'all provide, or do you provide an analysis, similar size cities? You've got, where we came back, and we were at 55%, reserve. And then when we were under budget, it would compare all those items and kind of grade you, or tell you were in the above or below the main standard.
I will check to see if we have that kind of statistics available. I'll check with Ben and see what he has on some of the cities he's doing. But
I know in private business, they'll do that. They'll come up and,
sure.
I don't know about municipal, but.
Right.
but
Well, I'll see what we got.
They tell you how you stand debt wise and everything.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I'll ask you another question. You didn't talk to us quick enough.
All right.
So here we go. The COVID funds,
Yes.
could you identify that? Show
Yes.
how that's applied?
Yes. So you did receive some funding this year, but the expenditures weren't, they weren't spent. So we moved those to an unearned
Okay.
revenue fund. So if you're flipping back to, if you look at, if you look at page 21, if you look under the liabilities area, then we have, that 256,000 in unearned revenue.
Right.
Okay, so that's where the funds that have not been spent, that's where we put those.
You said it inside, so there was an answer.
Right. Any other questions? And we'll be happy to answer. Even after we leave, just give us a call. We'll be happy to answer. Okay.
Thank you.
What again is unearned revenue?
Well, so just like on those, you received grant funding, the city did. You had expenditures, you had a small amount of expenditures going against that revenue, but that revenue wasn't spent. So all we did was set that revenue aside to show that it wasn't, you didn't earn the revenue, you didn't have the expenditure to go against it. So that's what.
It's just an offsetting answer.
Right. Basically just sets them aside to get ready to use them. So then next year, with the unearned, with those bond payments or the expenditures that are coming in with that bond, each year you're gonna have a single audit. Well, I'm assuming that they're over 750,000. You'll continue to have a single audit, which once we do that, any kind of federal money that comes in, like in the CARES Act or the ARPA funds, either one of those, then
But they
any kind of
exceed
expenditures.
750.
Yes,
Cumulative.
yes. So just giving you, if you'll flip the little smaller book, I'll flip you to the page where you can kind of see what federal funds that you had. If you look at page 13. So this is expenditure driven, the single audit is. So you had $2,137,526 dollars spent on that Texas board funds. And then coming down on the public assistance disaster grant, which is that, like some of that CARES fund, there was 20,342 spent. So if there were other federal monies that you got in the 22 year, then next year you'll see those listed as on those expenditures. You'll see each one of those listed.
Okay. But to have the mandate for the single audit, these funds would not be counted next year. It will just be for funds coming in during the 22,
Well,
23 budget.
in any expenditures that you had, like you had any other unspent bond proceeds.
Right. Like retaining general water plant.
Right, so if anytime that's gonna trigger, if you go over 750,000 on any of those
In
expenditures,
that calendar year.
yes.
Okay.
So next year, if, any of those expenditures on that particular thing goes over 750,000, then we're gonna also look at all federal funds too.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Okay, you're mandated.
Okay, yes.
Go ahead.
Any more questions? I'm waiting for questions. If you got any more other than that, I mean, you did a great job on the budget, fund balance looks good. Overall, you did good, great.
Okay, but I would like to see if I could see the standing.
Okay,
Each other's.
I'll send Ben an email and, let them know to get you the information.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And if you come up with any more questions, please let us know. I'm happy to answer.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We are going to move on to new business. Item 1, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of Amendment 1 to Task Order 10 to expand the water and wastewater PIF. This amendment will increase the contract by $4,487.50. Mr. Escamilla.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith had asked that we tabled last time. I think the reason to hold that payment back was to see if our contract, we could have kind of an end date of the contract with our previous engineer, Freeland Turk. And they turned over all the information to our bureau. We had meetings with them, and officially they will pass the baton on August 15th. But as of today, we were going to have a meeting that we met with the contractor with the water plant without Freelandsburg, and they turned everything over. So effectively, we have a new engineer and very little to do with the original engineer. But officially it'll be August 15th. So they've met the requirements of the last one, so.
Okay, then I've got one question for you. You know, we did this in an effort to help ensure a smoother transition. And I've asked you previously, but I'll ask you again. You were satisfied with the transition and feel comfortable? Are you recommending we approve this invoice?
Yes, I'm recommending you do that, and I do think that we've now gone through the steps. We have talked to Texas Water Development Board. I've actually spoken to them, and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and no one has an issue with this transition, including TWD.
Okay. And this should be the last. Check.
Yes, it should be.
Well, no, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, because,
Outweigh, you talking about outweigh?
Yes. I mean, they're still, Shark is still doing the outlay until 8/15.
So 8/15.
So they have performed other invoices also.
I guess there'll be one left.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but
Do you know
we-
how
we
much that's for?
basically passed the baton.
We got it today. But,
Just curious.
Well, I was getting ready to make a motion that this was the final payment.
Yeah.
And that's not the case.
No.
no.
The other case.
Yeah,
Yes,
we have an outlay
okay,
process.
Okay, but moving back, I understand how to do this.
Okay.
they have a contract amount that's set. I can't tell you what it is, but they have a contract amount. And this work order increases the contract amount, $4,487.50. Correct? So, Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we approve Amendment 1 to Task Order Number 10 to increase the contract amount $4,487.50, with the understanding this is the last change order, task order, or increase in contract amount with the Freeland Turk Engineering. Comfortable with that?
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Smith has moved to approve Amendment 1 to Task Order 10 to extend the water and wastewater PIF to increase the contract by $4,487.50, with the understanding that this will be the last task order change, contract increase
To be approved by council.
to be approved by council. And there was a second by Mayor Pro Tem Barron. Any more discussion? All in favor? All. The motion carries unanimously. You're going to move on to item 2, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of software contract in the amount of $55,000 for fiscal year 2022-2023 between FundView and the city of Blanco.
Mayor, council. So recently, I think the last few years, and actually what you're gonna look at tonight has been done by QuickBooks. And what made QuickBooks more difficult in the past is we have a convention that's multi-level with a spreadsheet. And it's a lot more complicated than that, but essentially, we have the last couple of years, I think we've been looking at the different programs. One we had looked at was going to be AdComp, and the reason why the previous council had approved the JAX system that we had outside with automated water and sewer payments, and that actually was part of the AdComp system. And so we've been looking at that, but after reviewing that information, looking at what they can and can't provide, decision was made by staff anyhow to look at using this FundView instead. So having said that, Sal should go to say a few things about FundView, because that's not what I do.
Okay. I think y'all have the little packet in there, FundView, like the quote. I don't think they do. Oh. Okay, okay. We can put it, I think you have it on your. So on her, what we're trying to get approved is, they sent us a quote for, I think it was like 45,000. That's for the bank package. So I have went over to the additional things that we need, and I'm knocking out anything like HR or anything extra we have been living without that we can keep going without. So I'm not trying to gouge for anything, but we do need some, since they had that machine that's put up front that we don't use, it's just a nice little decoration for people to walk by and look at. They do have some additional charges to have where the customers can pay online for permit, court, or utility billing. So that's additional units added to the base plan that I think we need to utilize. So our customers can definitely use it online to make an online payment, so they don't always have to come in or walk in. They can just visually go onto the system anywhere from their phone or wherever and pay right there online. So that would be for additional $750 for each, for the permit section, for the court, and for the utility. Each one would be $750 on top of the $45,000.
And you think you need it for the permit section?
I think we need it for the permit section because it'd be helpful a lot, actually, I think, because, you know, some people don't want to come in and especially like big contractors and things can definitely, and it's $750. Now, we do have to the 45 is not gonna be an ongoing amount.
That was my question. What's the
Right, so the
maintenance
total
versus
amount that
the-
after I went through everything would come out to 55, price a little less. But I put 55,000 out there, come down a little less for everything that we need to use for all the departments. But that's a one-time charge this year or the year coming up.
Right, for that piece of the salt.
Right, for everything, but going forward, it would only come out, the reoccurring amount would be 29,500 for
And that's
everything.
for updates and support.
That's for, yes, and we keep this leaky going, but we have to have the service and then come out and train and do all that, so this is why it's 54,750 exactly.
Okay, I understand the accounting portion of the contract coming in, but he's still gotta, you're gonna require signatures, you're gonna require plans and specifications, you know, to be submitted and everything, and they're gonna, is that, oh, we're not set up to do that online now.
Correct.
So maybe he could pay the fee online, but he's still gotta come down to it.
Right, yeah, they still have to come down.
Well, then I just say 750 and, I mean, that's my thought on it.
They email, I think they email them now.
Well, they can do that, but it's still, you,
Is there, I guess the question is there everything that needs to be done? Can everything else be done online, or are there always things that are being required? And we get new forms done, and y'all been doing a ton of work online, so can somebody email, can they do everything electronically, and therefore the payment's the only thing left not able?
Correct.
Or, so
But
that
they don't have, the payment is the only thing left that they
Oh,
can't do online right
how
now.
many permits do we issue a year?
A lot.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head how much, but
It's a
I
whole
know we have
question.
at least 4 per month, I think, because I
Over, higher than that.
well, I mean, amount like, I don't know, because like, some of them are quite large. So I know that I just did a census and we have permits that happen every month. I mean, we get quite a bit. But I mean, we can knock that out. It's 750, we can knock that out if you want.
Well, we can add it back later
We can
date
always add it later,
at the
yes.
same price.
Because this,
What?
well, this, I don't know about that. I don't want to tell you wrong. Right now, this is the contract, quote that we have. And I think the quote's only good because they know we're from council right now. So I can't promise you later.
ask.
I can ask.
You can ask.
I
I
can't
mean,
promise you what it would be like.
Yeah, but the permitting stuff is an add-on item.
Yes.
Right, and I mean,
So right now, I will put a
I
start.
mean, we could add a lot of things later, at a later date. The system that we have is non-compatible with the kiosk that we bought. Is that correct?
Correct.
There's no latitude to have the kiosk operational into this system?
No, not that one.
And tell us a little bit, I know you guys do a lot of research, and help us understand cost benefit to going with this versus the others that you looked at. Because you explored, if I recall, you said it was actually less expensive and it does more.
It actually, like financial reporting wise, it does great. It ties in, reports, you know, from the court side to utility billing or all of that and into finance. So we don't have to sit here and manually do all the journal entries that we're doing now. It's tying all of them together. And we're looking at, I don't know what they're little handheld with the police that will actually tie in so they don't have to do handwrite tickets anymore. It will all tie. Every department will actually talk to each other.
Get out.
Right now, we have, right now, each department has their own software and none of it talks.
And we have to literally manually put it all into QuickBooks because nobody talks to each other.
Court has like vet data, utilities has RBS, there's nothing for permits. And then QuickBooks is accounting and none of it talks to each other.
And I've done several quotes with different softwares, and I mean, this is the best you're gonna get for it to all tie together and have all the departments work and give you actual numbers and bring you more correct information than any of the other ones because we can't afford them.
I don't
It's just
so.
under our league.
I've got another question.
Okay,
With this being approved, when will it be fully
That
operational?
was my next thing, the The startup is 60, they can have it like ready to go in 60 to 90 days.
Yeah, we can start our next budget.
Right, on this.
Yes, I'm trying my best, so if it is approved, then I can go back to them and say it has been approved, we sign up, and he said it would fall on who, first come, first served. So I don't know how many right now they have pending, but I told him what the deadline we're kind of looking for. I'd like to start-
What is our deadline to have it operational and training? This includes the training too, correct?
Correct.
Okay, to
I'm-
have
I'm
it
trying to
operational
get
with
to
training.
it Now. November, I would probably say, but again, this is all based on, he told me first come, first served. He
Well, I
knows what's
understand,
coming
but
today, so I'm hoping by November, we would be fully.
November the first.
Let's say midway. through November.
And is actually, well, are they willing to make the contract? I mean, because we got screwed over before by being told that something was gonna happen, and it didn't, and it didn't, and it didn't, and it didn't, and we waited a whole year. Or is there any sort of guarantee in this contract
Well, I
that they're
think-
actually gonna make it happen? We put that into.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes, it will be, and I don't know, y'all don't know me, I haven't been there that long, but I'm really impatient, so we will get what we're paying for.
Good.
Okay.
And what I want us to be sure of is that we aren't, penny wise, pound foolish family. You guys who are in the offices all day, every day, know how much work is involved with taking checks, logging them in, depositing them at the bank, reconciling the bank stuff. The online payment of these things makes a difference. And in terms of how efficient you can work, how much better record keeping may be, duplications of efforts, all those things, then, I don't want us to go, $700. You don't want to do that. If you think that's the value, because you're in the office all day every day.
Right. Well, I do want to tell you the additional things that I did show besides those 3 online payments.
There's another 8,500 that's not accounted for. That's what I want to know about.
So with the online payments, there's a service charge which goes with one time of $500. So that $500 goes towards that $750 for each one if we choose that. So that's out there. Then also we have to have the permit modular so we can have the permits and things out there. We're gonna have the permit modular, which is $1,750. Then you have to have the service portion to that, which is $1,500. But again, all the service ones is a one-time charge this time for
Okay, but now this is all,
additional to the 45, which would bring us up to the 54.
okay, but permit wise, building permit wise, or development permits, or whatever type permit wise, it's only $750. Or it has.
That's just for the online payment portion. That's just so people can pay online for permits.
Okay, so what else are we paying for?
The permit modular, that way it has the permit stuff. She can actually scan the information. That's another thing that the software system, the permit. Or the older. Sorry.
Okay.
The permit lady.
Yeah,
Permit lady. Yes.
okay, so,
So much more than a permit later.
okay, so we've got in the advantage to scanning this is what? Versus having a hard for archiving?
Right. I mean, we can have hard copy. A lot of people still like to keep the hard copies, but it's definitely a safekeeping because it's on the cloud and it stays out there. So if something ever crashes, the building burns down, we still have all that information, not just on permits, but for every portion of each department that we have.
And I don't know, and if that's shareable data, which most of these programs are, it would be beneficial to us to go for it. Right now, if we're driving around and we see construction and there's not a permit posted, Olga actually has a 3-ring binder with copies of it. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, if this is accessible, an officer can see someone's building a shed or whatever.
It is.
The officer can look and see if a permit's been issued. So it gives
Okay,
gives everyone in
I
the field
understand
real
that.
time.
I mean, I understand that part.
Yeah, we have.
Now, if we're gonna be doing, if the officer's gonna access this information in his vehicle, can he do it on the equipment he has now?
Yes.
Yes, because it's on the cloud, it's like on the internet. You just get on the internet, you put in that, and you put in your
They'll have
login
their,
and ID, they'll have their own login and ID. they can get in, they can see
Okay,
information
so
right
if
there.
they're doing electronic tickets, that's the same thing, they can do it with their.
Well, so with this program, it provides,
For that part, that's your part.
see, I don't want to say that. So this does offer an electronic ticket writing capability. So there's a separate device for that. Should be hopefully at the council meeting next week. Core technology funds will pay for that. So there's restricted funds to pay for things like that we have on hand. So with the electronic ticket writers, the officer writes the citation on the electronic ticket writer. It has a docking station, places the device in the docking station, and it automatically uploads to court. Right now, we're writing paper citations, so a normal traffic stop could be 7 to 12 minutes, depending on the violation. And then the court clerk now currently has to take the handwritten citation, and she has to enter the same exact data into her database because our paper doesn't talk to her database. With this program, it'll probably save 15 to 20 minutes, would be my guess, per citation when you combine P and court time.
And we already have the funds, you said this is gonna come from where?
For the ticket writer portion of it, we have core technology funds. So if every citation that's written, a certain, I think it's $4 per citation is kept, is the city passed an ordinance years ago to add that $4 fee for core technology. So under core technology, the state regulates what those funds can be used for. Electronic ticket writers are, I think, the first listed authorized expense under that.
Okay.
So the money is there for that portion of it. We didn't get that quote for the ticket writers until today because we weren't sure what software the city was going to go with, because we wanted to make sure that moving forward, all of our technology talks. Unlike the past, we didn't have that ability for it to talk.
So Chief Rubin, this will save PD time as well as administration time?
It'll save time on the citation writing cycles.
Okay, every ticket.
Everything.
Okay, cool.
And then this is, when I looked at, or I didn't have time to look at the audit thing, but one of the big things in years past that we found out about was that we hadn't been complying with government accounting standards. So did you get that all cleaned up this time so that the numbers they got were what they needed to do for 2021? Or is this what's going to allow us to begin to be in compliance with that in the next budget?
Well, because you really can't do, government fund accounting in QuickBooks. So, I mean, with the audit people, we are working together and kind of push together, which we're making it work, but again, you can't do that until we actually get this.
It should reduce our audit costs substantially.
Yes, it will save a lot of time because we don't even have, GL account codes like we should. And so hopefully next year it will be great. And I already told the auditors about Fund You and they understand, they know Fund You and they're like, wonderful. So everybody actually around the board is happy about them.
The terms of their agreement that they've tendered to us for us to engage them for this new accounting software, what are the terms of payment?
That I will have to get back with you. I am not quite sure. I don't want to be the wrong answer, so I can let you know for sure. But I told them that it would have to be in the upcoming budget year to use the funds to pay for this. So they do understand where we're getting it from. So I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
Well, the reason I'm asking, if we pass a motion to approve this, I feel it would be, we give them a deadline. We give them a deadline of November the 15th to have that up and operational. And that's it. That's the deadline. I understand it's first come, first served. If they can't service us, they can tell us that next week and we can discuss it at the next meeting.
Absolutely.
So, but I want them to still have for them to still have equity in the success of getting this operational. And I don't want to pay them in full until it's completely done. And that's why I'm asking about the terms.
Okay.
If you could, you got that available in your office?
Yes, I think I could go over there and get that.
If you could find that, and we might table this for a few minutes and let her
Or would be payment upon completion of installation,
Like
training,
this
et
is
cetera, no later than November 15th.
Yeah, and if they don't, then what?
Do we-
what's the
Do we need
purpose?
to make a motion today, or can we talk about this more at our meeting on Tuesday?
I just think try to get it
Let's
Get it
do
off the table.
Give me 10 minutes.
And I have some things to add, so while
Yeah.
I talk on.
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
May I just ask, this is already budgeted, this
So-
cost, where's it coming from? How are we gonna do
So
it?
the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
It's in your budget.
Okay.
But the reason why we put it in the enterprise budget, not the general fund budget, we put it in the enterprise budget. The reason for that was water and sewer. I'm gonna explain. One of the things that when we're looking at all of this, water and sewer, the enterprise funds do not pay their fair share. So what I'm getting at is that most cities will take 10 or 12% of the money that water and sewer brings in, and they'll pay the general fund for services rendered. We do not do that. The only payment that we get from the water and sewer fund is for the utility fund, which is sold. So that is the only, so in a lot of places, like I said, they pay 10 or 12%. Some places even more than that. So in this sense, because this also has to do, this also helps with the utility billing, we would actually put it over there. The reason why it works for that is because we are also getting a free utility rate study that we'll be looking at in the next couple of months. And we should be getting enough from that if you as a council agrees to raise utility rates to actually pay for that, plus some other items that we'll go through during the budget. But to answer your question, it'll be funded through that. Other thing I wanted to mention, Councilman Smith said he wanted a little cleanup here. This new fund view won't actually decrease costs, it'll decrease the time that staff takes to do financial accounting.
Right, but it will also save your auditor time.
Save our auditor time, but the auditor, we have a 5-year contract with the auditor, $32,000 each year for each fiscal audit, and then of course, you know, the single audit side.
We-
Amounts.
I found that having the correct software that was manageable with that type of the type of accounting I needed, I was able to reduce my accounting. Percentage completion. We did not have percentage completion. We just had a cash book.
It'll be a lot less effort to get.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you were trying to shove a square peg in a round hole. But when we got all that out, our accounting fees went down. And hopefully we could, once we prove that to our firm, I think we should anticipate a reduction in accounting costs.
So one of the things Belle Harris did not go over, and I'm glad that she came here and explained things, but you have a management letter, and then there are different things that they want management
Yes.
to fix certain things, and I hope you read through it. One of them is making sure that you use GASB standard. The other thing is looking at how, how all of these things work. And what we will be doing the next couple of months is we'll have a letter back to council saying how we have addressed these issues. So the software is part of that equation to help fix it.
It's a huge part.
Okay, I'm gonna have us table this for now and move on to item 3 because we have a counselor that needs to get going. So item 3, consideration, discussion, and take action on approval of continuance of stage 3 water restrictions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So a couple of weeks ago, the reason why we considered moving this from stage 2 to stage 3 was the water tank level. I don't see what we have marked here. The water tank levels went from one tank was supposed to be at 20 and went down all the way to 7 or 8 feet, and then the other tank, which was supposed to be 10, went down to 2 or 3 feet, which is what I consider dangerous levels. If something happens and those water levels stay too low or the pressure is not enough, it could create the need for more water tanks. It's not the city's fault, but it is the city's problem that those tanks weren't kept being filled. However, since that time, Canyon Lake Water Authority has fixed some of their issues. I guess there's a screening they fixed. They've been looking at some of the things, and other than a few minor hiccups we've had, those water tank levels have stayed relatively at the levels they're supposed to. There's been a few times they've gone down. So I think the recommendation would be that we stay at the drought 3 level. However, but we amend that to allow residents to be able to hand water their plants between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. I was hoping Zach would be here so he can kind of expand on that. But I think that would be the reasonable thing. The other thing I want to mention is that myself or the mayor has authority to make that decision. But I thought this was important enough to talk to council, and if people have questions, certainly I want to be transparent, and that's why we're talking about this now.
And I think, given I've been checking with Zach Katie as well, and the levels are holding. The Canyon Lake had a failed filter. They've done a workaround, so they were a third down on the production of treated water, which their workaround, because it'll be 30 weeks for them to get a new filter built, but the levels seem to be holding. And they also put an emergency stop all outside use to cut down on the use from their other customers. So
Okay,
with that said, I think that it looks like we could allow our residents now to be able to at least hand water trees and shrubs between.
Would that be contradicting the Canyon Lake Water Authority?
so are we not obligated to mirror or be as restrictive or more restrictive than the Canyon Lake under our agreement with them?
I believe we passed an ordinance that said we would do that. Or we made a policy that we would follow whatever their, wherever they were at.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I think
I
we
don't
did,
know if there's
I
a-
vaguely remember us doing that.
Probably like 5, wasn't it?
No,
5 or
Yeah.
6.
short-term memory.
So,
If Canyon Lake isn't allowing outdoor watering, I don't know why we should be allowing outdoor watering. That doesn't make sense to me at all.
Would it
Sorry.
be possible, because I don't know how long they're gonna have their emergency, because they're on an emergency drought, so maybe we could amend our stage 3, but continue to follow the emergency drought plan of Canyon Lake. And then when that's removed, then we will have this already applied, amended to the stage 3. So when they do remove their emergency, then we will have stage 3 still, but we'll have the amendment saying that people
Yeah.
can water between 8 and 8.
Yes.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think if Canyon Lake has all their individual customers on this restriction, and they do, there's out, and it goes through a certain date. It's all outside watering is restricted through August the 20-something. If I don't remember, maybe that's when they thought they'd get something fixed or something. Okay, just saying. Talk from it, and I'll tell you what it is.
And just while we're talking, just so everybody knows, New Braunfels, just down the road, their utilities, they have been on stage 3 since June 21st. And in their stage 3, it says watering with a handheld hose, bucket, drip irrigation system, or soaker hose that does not spray water in the air is allowed any day, but only from before 10 a.m. or after 8 p.m. So if we do make this amendment, it's not too different from a neighbor down the street.
And I will just say that one big reason I bring this to you is have unhappy residents, people that want to start watering. And I understand both sides. I understand our side of it. We have to make sure that we have enough water for the residents, but at the same point, to make sure that people aren't fatigued and have a drought fatigue. But have no mind about it.
Their note says it is crucial to avoid outdoor water use in extreme drought conditions to ensure the water is available for the most critical needs and to preserve human health and safety. That's what they're publishing. And it does not have It was effective July the 29th. But there's no, maybe it was the county had one that was, the county extended their,
They extended their burn.
maybe it was their birth, maybe I run those two together. Yeah, I think we need to be, I think we may be obligated to restrict the watering. It'd be nice to be able to water with a hose. I'd be tickled to death, but.
Are our restrictions, do our restrictions mirror their restrictions when at a level or at a level? I know they're saying, they're making a statement, no outdoor watering. But otherwise, I don't even know if our stage 2 and stage 3 is universal. Is that something that's state? Is that Canyon Lakes restrictions? Do we have our own? What do we do?
Different cities have their own. I know some cities, they start at a higher level. I know the city I came from, year round is 1 day a week watering based on your address and it's very long. So their stages would be different than ours.
Well, I'll go back to what Councilor Devine said, and that was that, but I think we put something in place. I mean, now that you say that.
Mhm. I think we did. I think we said we will, we're following Canyon Lake's water, but they're on restriction.
I would say we could approve stage 3 to continue with stage 3 and work and have it follow and be compliant and as restrictive as the current Canyon Lake policy. And their restrictions they're geographic. Depends on where you are in their system.
Yes.
You know, and so there may be other areas that are still in stage 2.
That's correct.
So,
Uh-huh.
And we were forced to go to 3 while they were still in 2. Because they weren't providing the water.
They weren't filling it.
That's right. And so that was, and I do have to say, thanks to Warren and to Dana and the person in charge, we really had to stay on them to get them to cut back on the rest of their area because we were having to cut back on our citizens.
Right.
because the tanks weren't being full.
Right.
And so, and they were prohibiting irrigation systems, and yet every night on non-watering weeks, their tank levels were going down because people were still watering, even though, so they go all the way to that, with absolutely no water.
well, you can drive around, they got a green yard,
And I know, right?
and some were astroturf,
That's
for
right.
water.
I know. So, yeah. So I'm not sure where we're
I think
going.
have rainwater.
Maybe that's rain.
Maybe so.
It's Saturday.
Let's see.
I got
So
an
you need-
answer from Olga about the permits.
What?
She said it varies, but maybe 150 to 200 per year.
Okay,
That's
so if you're spending $7.50 a permit, and it's recoverable through that fund.
The best thing is what she said, that having that online system.
Well, I was just talking about the collection portion.
And I would think too, with code enforcement, you're gonna see an increase in permits.
Yeah.
Especially on
Yes.
signs and fences.
Yeah.
And if you are considering PIDs in the future, I mean, that's, I mean, the couple that I've talked about, I mean, you're gonna see a lot of permits come in, so. I don't know what the timing of that is, but I think it's gonna increase.
I guess I'm gonna ask one more question about the water and we'll try to get off this. Have we received any notification from Canyon Lake to restrict our water use?
Now, because we were more restricted than they were.
Well,
So we were already doing the watering when they still were. So that was the concern.
so, but I mean, to the point of us, whatever we passed that said we're gonna follow them.
But
And now we hear that they have,
they have
some people
different
are on
standards.
stage 2, some people are on 2, and some people are
Yeah,
on 3.
I've got an email from it, and it's telling me
We
what
get to kind of
communities are under, you know, I mean, it's different things. So I think the motion, I'm gonna try for a motion, okay? that we continue with stage 3, modify it to allow outdoor watering as long as it, like Warren said, in the evenings or whatever, about block number, however we want to do that. Provided it's not in violation or to the demands that the Canyon Lake has placed on us. If they've not sent us any notice, they haven't put any restrictions on us, or we can check and see if there are any restrictions.
Okay, Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the continue stage 3 water restrictions and to modify them to allow outside watering between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m.
By hand.
by hand.
Right.
Hand post them.
Provided it's in
Provided
compliance with the directives
it's-
from Canyon Lake.
In compliance with the directive of Canyon Lake. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mayor Pro Tem Barron has seconded. Any further discussion?
So currently, we would not be allowing hand watering, is that correct?
Until we find out
Correct.
what restrictions Canyon Lake, I assume, would communicate with us and tell us what drought stage we're in.
Well, I'd just like to make the point, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, regardless of what Canyon Lake's doing, we're in a more precarious position than they are because we're at the end of the straw and we're having these continuous problems with our tank levels. So I don't think, the day they allow hand watering, I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right decision for us. That's all, the only comment I want to make about that.
Warren, didn't they resolve the tank issues at this time?
Yeah, they have, we had an issue a couple of days ago, that our SCADA system had crashed, and that's why we didn't know what the levels were. But their end, they're fixing that today, their end, they have actually fixed that issue. They haven't had normal tank flow. So the last few years.
I guess,
I wonder if we can put in there to make it a little bit more restrictive than everybody can water every night, 8 to 8. Can we do something where it's even numbers
yeah, even
and
in our,
honor
that's fine.
these 3 and kind of split it
Why
down
don't
the middle so that
we leave
people
that
can,
to our city staff to monitor the tank levels?
right,
And if they start getting low, then we'll send the watering.
right. But I'm just saying, we have to tell our citizens
Yeah, by
something.
address, I think that
So-
makes sense to develop a by.
That way we're kind of
address.
cutting it into half. I mean, I think most people would be thrilled to be able to water every other night
Right,
How
rather
about-
than
how
going
about
weeks
one
without
night-
being able to
one night a
water their
week?
trees.
We'll just,
one night a week and then by addresses, we could figure out how, not everybody's doing it on one.
On one night, right.
I mean, I'd be happy with one
Makes my
night.
head explode.
I think most people would be happy to water their trees once a week
Once a week was
or
staggered.
twice a week
addresses.
or, something in there.
There's already an item on there for watering vegetable gardens from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And it's on the uneven system, so all you have to do is add. That's part of
Which
stage
one?
3.
Thanks.
So all you have to do
But I
is,
thought we said we
add.
changed it. I thought recently we said no watering vegetable garden.
No, that is part of stage 3.
You do get vegetable
So
garden.
you can include with
And that
vegetable
includes fruit
gardens.
trees. Vegetable fruit gardens. Sorry, I'm not gonna let my fruit. trees.
Well, whatever we
Yes,
do,
include plants.
I think we should be happy with it to the point that we're going to be consistent about it throughout the drought because people will get fatigued if we keep changing the rules on them every other week or so.
Well, and I think again, unfortunately, we had to change the rules. It wasn't because of us or our residents. It was because
And we were-
we weren't-
Right, but I mean,
We're
I guess
gonna
if
have
you're
to
gonna
be
err on the
flexible.
side of caution, then we don't allow water. And if we've got a chance. I don't know how you get that out of all the residences. You could, if the tank levels are satisfactory,
Well,
maybe you have to check with City Hall before water.
Well, I mean, we have the capacity to, people who are signed up, on the city website can get a notice if something changes. But I think we're gonna have to have a little bit of flexibility here because, you know, if something fails again, we're gonna have to cut back again. I think people are gonna have to be flexible with it if they want to water at all. They're gonna have to roll with it.
Well, I think people understand if we're mirroring what Canyon Lake is mandating. I think that's very understandable. I think they will forgive us for that. But if Canyon Lake starts to allow outdoor watering, then I think we should have some kind of, you know,
I think they are
something in
allowing
place.
outdoor watering in some areas. That's the point. It's like they've got some people on two. and
Well,
some
but
people on three.
I mean,
But we're in a different position than, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying, if we're talking about mirroring, you know, we have to pick which area we're mirroring. So,
So we had a motion and a second. All in favor?
we repeat the
can
motion.
we?
I
please.
got the motion too.
Please give me that motion.
Okay, so the motion was from Counselor Smith to approve to continue stage 3 water restrictions, but to modify that to handheld watering from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., provided it's not,
It's allowed by
Invalid.
Canyon Lake.
yes.
Well, that's kind of, you know, so, I mean, that's, you know, if Canyon Lake says it's okay, then it's okay.
And I would probably tighten that even a little bit more to say handheld watering for trees and shrubs. I don't know that we can keep lawns alive.
Okay.
That's one thing I'm a little worried about, lawns are a lot, but trying to keep.
I think
that's
that
a really
that would be
good
a
point.
landscape
Right.
more, so I think,
Yeah, okay.
You know, this stage 3 includes the north side of Canyon Lake from FN 306 to 448, US Highway 281, Spring Branch Boulevard, including Rebecca Creek, River Crossing, Spring Hills, Hidden Trails, and Edge Brook.
Is it the side closest to us? Is that right?
Well, that's,
What's
Stage
between
three.
them and us?
So
What's
again,
between them and us to try to keep water?
it makes sense to me that whatever their
well,
most
it didn't
restrictive,
pick up, well, it says Spring Branch. I mean, that gets us a big area, so.
it still seems to me whatever their most restrictive.
Sandy in the States is on, and that's the same tank we were pulling out of, and they're on stage 3. And stage 3 is no outside watering, so at this point, it wouldn't be rescinded. From what I just read on their website. So, but when they rescind it there, then we would allow outside watering here.
that's what the motion is.
Okay, let's try it again. We'll make another motion.
Okay, I realize this is already this stage 3, but I do think that it should not just be vegetables, it should be vegetables and fruits. Because a lot of people have fruit trees. And so if it's only a vegetable garden that can legally be watered and people have fruit trees, they should be able, they're food crops. Maybe they're food crops.
I think people are watering their tomatoes right now. That's technically approved, isn't it? Do we have to make
But
that?
that's not my peach tree. That's my point.
I know.
And now you're gonna have tomatoes. Peaches. So anyway, I guess we can't change the wording on this right now to say food crops instead of vegetable garden.
Yeah.
Or can we?
We certainly can. We have to have that motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
Yes.
And it's gonna be
Would you
the
like to take
outside.
it back?
Well, no, I mean, if it's allowed outside, at this point, you're saying you want to add modifier, okay. We'll read it again, ready?
Can you take
Take
your
away your
original
old motion.
What?
back? Take your original.
I'm gonna withdraw my motion.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And then I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the continuance of the stage 3 water restrictions with the following modification, that it would be inclusive of vegetables and fruits. It would have to be any other adjustment has to be compliant with restrictions imposed by Canyon Lake. Did that get it?
Are you removing the, hand watering now?
It's just gonna say by Canyon Lake.
Modify it
No.
to allow hand watering of vegetables and fruits.
No, the vegetable is already allowed.
Okay.
Vegetables
Dina
are
wants
allowed.
to add the word fruit with that.
All right, it will allow hand watering as allowed by Canyon Lake. Of shrubberies, trees and things of that nature.
So Councilmember Smith has made a motion to approve the continuance of stage 3 water restrictions with the following modifications. We are going to add fruit trees to the list with, it says currently it says the vegetable gardens can be watered, and we're going to add fruit as well. And we are going to allow
Hand watering.
watering between 8 p.m.
Or just as allowed by staff. We'll let Warren make that call.
as allowed by staff.
And it has to be in compliance with Canyon Lake's
And
restrictions.
all of this has to be in compliance with Canyon Lake water restrictions.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Awesome.
Right.
Okay, Councilor Devine was seconded. Any more discussion?
Wish it was a little more cleaned up.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll let staff clean it up, but we're between 8 and 8 by, as determined by staff, so staff will create an address or twice a week by certain addresses, or Tuesdays and Thursdays by odd numbers.
It's already in
Wednesdays and-
there.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And then
All in favor? All opposed? So the motion carries 3-1. Okay, we're going back to item 2. Discussion on fund view.
so, yeah.
what were the terms, did you find the terms of payment?
I did. Okay. So I actually called and got them on the phone real quick. And, we can put the agreement deadline date out there November 15th if that's what we choose to do. They feel it will be done before then, but that will be the ultimate final. They can't go past that, and they're totally fine with that. So we can put that in the contract. Now, payment wise, upfront, all the service portion of it will be paid upfront. So pretty much half of the total amount will be paid upfront so they can start to implement and all that. Now, each modular, depending on the department, so I guess they're gonna start with finance. Once they do us, once we go live, our section goes live, we pay that portion. So once each department goes live, then we pay the remaining portion for
And
each.
that's, and that's.
So it'll be
and
multiple
you'll
bills
already be
coming in,
tracked.
so when the permit goes live for, court, each one will pay once they go, get up and go live.
Okay, then you've answered all the questions I got.
Okay? And did y'all wanna know the other things that were added to the board? Okay.
Please.
Okay, so we are doing the online payments for those 3 departments. We're doing the permits, and all these have service fees to go with it, so. And then the last thing we're adding is the distributed time entry modular, and that will make it so we don't no longer have to do, paper time entry. They can do it from their phones. The police officers, when they're out duty, they can pull up their phone and put their time in right there, and then it will be approved online by the supervisors before it comes to accounting. So we no longer have to do paper copies. When they
Is that how
want
that
to-
worked, Chief?
Sir,
Is that how that would work?
Sounds like you have a.
we need to check with them because a lot of companies that do this, their software doesn't work with 12-hour shifts. So we need to make sure. Okay.
Already done. I knew that. So. I know, I'm sorry, I said.
No, that was my fear.
That satisfies you?
Yeah, because I've seen it become a nightmare with 12-hour shifts.
Okay.
No, they do. And the last thing is like if somebody wants to take a vacation day or something and they want to send it to their supervisor, all they have to do is go into their modular, put in whatever days they're requesting, like do the calendar, choose if they're gonna do sick or vacation, whatever one they're using it for, and submit that to their supervisor to go in an email to that supervisor. it'll prompt them, hey, they want to use 2 hours sick time for this to go to the doctor, whatever. They can approve back through their email and it'll automatically upload their timesheet for payroll once the supervisor approves it. So that would be a lot of time saving for PD and for finance.
All right.
One last question. So the annual, once this is all set up and we pay the 55,000 upfront,
Yeah.
29,000 a year to maintain it, is that correct?
Correct, yes, for all the modulars to keep it live, it's 29,500.
And do we have comparable costs now to maintain the system we're using?
What we're paying for,
I'm just curious how it,
We don't have it.
I'm just, I mean,
We don't have anything.
so there's no, we have no, this is just a completely new cost.
This is-
Okay.
It's gonna be, I actually do fund the county, how we should be doing it.
We do pay, I think like QuickBooks, we pay like 1,800 a year for like software updates.
For updates.
And each
right.
one, like we pay one for NetData, we pay one for RBM,
Right, so all those will go away.
all those will
Court
go
will
away.
go away, it'll all be in one system. We'll just have different modulars for everybody that ties into one.
Does it tell you how much, support, how many hours of support you have per year? Everything you remove the contract?
I think he told me about, but I don't know if it actually in here, like, that are,
Okay, no. Well, maybe it's unlimited.
no, it's not. I don't know that answer, but I know that he told me, but I don't
Well,
know. the wrong answer.
then I'll,
I don't remember.
okay, were you comfortable with it?
Yes, we actually, I had different departments in here besides just finance, because I don't just think finance is choosing them. We actually had to do modules for court and how that would work, utility billing. Olga wasn't able to step away, but we have covered for her, so we kind of know how the system works. So, Lori was there with us, I had Teresa here. So anybody who wanted to come over and view it when they were doing their demo here with us, they could definitely, but I wanted to see all of it and see how it all interacts, because I'm not just worried about finance, because it all ties back into finance. So I wanted to make sure I watched all the modulars and see how they all work, and he actually went through each module and showed us, and that's how it helped me make the decision on what we needed and what we can live with.
And you actually liked it better than Encode and the other one.
Yes, because in code, just like this one, you pay for certain modulars, of course, we have to pay for each modular. But in code is, I mean, we can't afford in code, I'm just being honest, there's just no way to do it.
And the guy and the man, the owner and his wife used to work for Encode for like 15 years. So this is like kind of a copycat system of them.
So we
but
knew what glitches.
And they're
to
based out of
actually fix,
Texas, aren't they?
Which was wonderful.
I think so.
I think they're based out of Tyler.
They're actually in Lubbock. People. I don't know if they should be
Encode is.
What's that?
Encode is that.
Funny's out of
Okay,
Lubbock.
Encode's out.
They're out of Lubbock.
Okay.
And Sasha, are there other cities that we can look to that are using the same program?
Yes, yes.
Johnson City.
Johnson
Oh,
City is
okay.
one that's the closest one to us.
Okay.
There's a lot of cities, and he's gonna give us contacts to reach out to him. He's already given us some. So we do have, phone a friend person that can help us in case we have any.
Do we know if Johnson City is satisfied?
I called them actually, and so far they're having no issues, and they enjoy it. Now, they never had Encode. I came from Encode, but I know that a lot of cities don't implement everything because their modules are so expensive. So you're still doing half the work manually because nobody can really afford all the modulars to make Encode work smoothly.
Last question, has Olga expressed any opinion about this?
Yes, Olga,
She-
like I said, she couldn't come over, but we did tell her all the things that her permit or her, module would have, and she's on board with it, especially because it speaks to the other departments, which is wonderful.
Warren, do you have any comment on that? I want your opinion as well.
I have looked at it and I think it's a really great program. Again, I'm always a bottom line person, and when we first started looking at the budget, and I know everybody worked really hard on it last year, but with the financial accounting and money coming in and money coming out, it was really hard with QuickBooks, at least for me.
No, I understand.
So
I
I
mean,
think
we gotta change. I mean, are you,
Yeah.
Yes.
are you happy with this as our provider?
Absolutely.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Mayor, I'll make a motion.
Lori, you are as well, right?
Yes, I'm happy.
Okay.
And I have like secretary friends in Wimberley that this, my secretary friend that was in Wimberley, she's who introduced me to FundView and talked highly of it and introduced me to the guys and got it going. And so I asked them to do a demo for us. I think Mason, there's a bunch of little cities that use them. So. And
Ready
then
for a
I get
motion?
like emails from cities that are like who uses it, and I've had like positive responses.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
I am ready for it.
All right, I make a motion that we approve approval of the software contract in the amount of $55,000 for fiscal year 2022, 2023 between FundView and the city of Blanco.
Councilmember,
I'm not finished. All right. Payment provision shall be on a progressive draw system as they have it with a completion date of November the 15th, 2022. And no additional, if they're not finished on November the 15th, 2022, no additional progressive draws until they are. We'll just suspend payments till they get finished.
Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the software contract in the amount of $55,000 for fiscal year 2022, 2023 between FundView and the city of Blanco with the
Condition that they're
Conditions
complete by November.
that they are complete by the November 15th, 2022. And if they are not, they will not be receiving payments until they.
The balance until they are. I mean, if they finish $45,000 of it and they only like 10,000 to get finished, when they get it operational, that's when they get finished.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mayor Pro Tem Barron has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. So we are going to move on to our budget workshop, but I think that we should take a 5-minute stretch. So at 5:02, we're going to take a stretch. Again. So at 5:12, we're going to be coming back into session. I apologize. Slide is not my friend. So everybody knows I'm Mayor Rachel Lumpel. Hopefully I don't need a sign, but anyways, we are going to move on to the budget workshop. And our one and only item is budget discussion workshop number 2.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to go over the budget calendar first, because that's changed, and then we go over why we're here and what we're hoping to accomplish. So, as you know, on July 12th, we had a first budget workshop. The reason why we didn't meet till now was because we get the official county appraisal roll that are delivered July 25th, right around that, maybe a couple days later. So we're at today. We're hoping that today is second and last budget workshop.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, so we're hoping that because then we would file the budget, tomorrow with the city clerk, with the city secretary, and then we will look at the tax rate, the fee schedule, and budget on August 22nd. August 22nd.
I won't be here.
It was not.
I will not be here. It's not a calendar for a day.
Okay, and we can change that. We'll change that date to 21st.
We just,
As long as you move it forward, it's
Sunday.
Sunday.
Can we change it to 23rd?
I'm gone that week.
No, we go back Friday. What about we do Friday before?
I'm here the Friday before. Friday.
That'll be the 19th.
Yeah, do it Friday, just can't do it Monday.
And the
I got a trip booked that is non-refundable and is on the calendar.
Without the
I am out the 16th through the 21st.
And you're gone when do you leave?
I leave on Monday, the 22nd. And I don't
And
get
you're-
back until. I
And
don't
you're,
get back till
you're
Friday.
unavailable starting the 15th?
15th through the 21st.
Oh, Lord.
Oh.
So we're gonna be here all
I
night.
scheduled that,
That's
I'll
what
say,
you're
because it was not, there was no budget anything that week, which is when I booked the trip around our budget stuff.
So I apologize. I'm explaining the reason why I need to change it.
Can we catch it later?
What's that?
We can't go later?
No, you
No.
have to do it by the 22nd, have to.
We can't do anything.
And when's your last day?
Friday the 19th. I leave on Monday and I'm gone that week because there was nothing on the calendar that week. I booked it
Can you
around
be on
20.
Zoom,
What?
Mike? Can you
You can't vote.
Then you can't vote.
Can't vote, it's on.
Yeah.
So let's look at the calendar. The reason for this is if you approve anything that is above the voter approved rate, that's the date.
Okay.
Correct.
Correct. And just to let you know, and then I'm gonna go backwards. The voter approved rate this year changed from 8% to 3.5%. So
Right.
no matter what we're gonna do, we're gonna go over what we call the voter approved rate. That's not enough. So why don't we think about it, and after we go through the budget, let's talk about the calendar.
All right, all right. So
And also the other thing is, I have to post notice in the paper, and then you gotta give 10 days. So if I post, the next time I can post it in the paper is August 10th, and 10 days from that,
It's the 20th.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can we do it on the weekend?
Can you please explain to the new guy what this date is going to entail and how long we're talking about? I'm just curious.
what you're talking about?
Oh.
This date that everybody, yeah.
Well,
That's when we.
That's where you adopt. That's just where you pretty much already.
Finalize it.
Okay.
It's just you go through the motions and you're adopting like,
The budget.
you have to adopt the budget first, then the maintenance, then the operating, and then you ratify, and then you adopt the tax rate.
It
Okay.
typically takes about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
work, the actual work is happening tonight.
Right.
And
It's just a vote, it's just a record
it's just
vote.
a breakfast.
You pretty much already know what you're doing.
And you can't, you're not adjustable at all on that? No.
Can you do it on a Saturday?
Can we do it on Saturday
I
or
can't
Sunday?
even come on Saturday.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
So what's the latest date that you can meet, Mr. Smith? What, is it 17th?
No,
14th.
I'm leaving 15.
He's leaving 15th. So that's next week.
Yes. Well, that's 11 days from now. What's today's this?
Today's a 40.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I'm
so,
not leaving till,
so she's got 10 days till the 15th if she.
But
puts
she
it
has
on.
to post it in the paper, which is only on Wednesday.
That's next week.
you can't just post it on at the city hall?
We do both.
It's gotta be in the paper?
Has to be in the paper.
Has to be in the paper.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, looks like somebody's not
Yeah,
gonna be here with that vote.
Let's find out-
Well, one of the two of us, yeah, I'm sorry.
Y'all
let's find out who's leaving online.
y'all need to do scissor paper rock to see who's.
I have to be,
They
I
can't vote
They
online.
can be online, but.
can be online and comment, but I can't. And you gotta have, maybe somebody else gets sick, you lose the room. You're really.
Well, I mean, we're gonna do the work tonight, basically, right? We're gonna kind of hammer down, unless there's any loose ends.
Yeah.
It's gonna get done tonight.
I'm gonna write it up.
I'll be in agreement.
Okay. Go ahead, Warren.
Okay, I'm
Okay, let's
sorry.
go.
Jump, which piece of paper beside the calendar do we pick up?
So I was gonna say that the goal, okay, so the goal here is to provide services to the public and establish, and basically council can establish priorities. Where I ID potential pitfalls and kind of looking at that, and then we'll provide as close a balanced budget as possible with the goal that this year we're pretty close to a balanced budget, and then by next year, we'll start working on a balanced budget, and then also start working on on a rainy day fund or increasing the actual general fund. And that's with both enterprise and the general fund. So those are the actual staff goals. I think we went through last time, a few weeks ago, went through a lot of the departments, but what you had asked us to do was to drill down on the numbers. I'm gonna do that now. And then you also asked to look at each individual department. So we've done that. So if we go through the general fund, this was based on, right now, I'm going to explain that fund this. I think we've heard from Bill Harris, the Hotcheck, heard that the 21 budget essentially was deficit $350,000. I think last year we approved the budget, which deficit was about $400,000.
Right.
The budget that actual now shows about $300,000 deficit. So that's where we started from. We started from a $300,000.
Well, and I guess at the same time, we were under budget to our budget, $107,000. That's the corrective action that was taken.
And that's the corrective action. Before, I guess, we really get started, look at everything again. The reason why you have all these multi-colors here is what we've done is, from the last couple of years, I believe you based your budget on the budget from, but what you didn't base it on was actually what was spent. And so what we're doing here is we're taking what was spent this year for the first 9 months and then projecting it out and saying, this is actually what your budget truly is if you were not to change anything. Okay? So go to page, and she's going to have it down to, it's the very bottom of that. Oh, you do have it.
I have it set.
Okay.
And I knocked out the other columns so y'all could.
And we can go through the rest of the general budget and see if there's things you want to transfer out or whatever. But essentially, we'll look a little closer and explain to you. Okay. If we were not to add any positions, if we were just to look at having a neutral budget for last year with some minor changes, things like cost of living and things like that, you basically would have to have, it would be this green. Truly balanced budget would be what we call an 11% increase over the ad valorem taxes. And you go to the tab that shows what the cost of property tax have. With an 11, and they affectionately call it orange toys. Which is terrible. Which is terrible. So you can say you thought something else was actually as a budget, but what that actually does is we're looking at homes that are $150,000, $250,000. What increase in rate? How much extra would a family have to pay in taxes? So if you looked at 8%, which was last year's voter approved, that would be $200. If it was $150,000, would be $120. For a $250,000 house, would be $200. For the 11%. Which is that last one, would be $275. So that's the actual, I know a lot of times we look at percentages, but the actual dollar amount is what we're actually focusing on, is how much extra would a resident have to pay for a house of X amount of dollars. So if 11% is $275 or $250, and if there is a $400,000 house, then that would be $450. Okay.
I've got a question. Right. What you're telling me is that Warren's Choice, I can see this in the paper.
I'll change it. I just did that big funny story.
Yeah, but the 11%.
Yes, sir.
The 11% would effectively balance our budget if we did not hire any additional people. Is that what you're telling me?
That is correct. It would essentially do that. The reason why we would still add the officers, add the part-time code enforcement person is we are taking 3 steps to hopefully close that gap. One thing is we're starting to put our money in Texas class, which will get us another 20,000. We will have Avenue Analytics look at the collection of misappropriated taxes and those things. We're hoping to get some more money from that. And then there'll be something, eventually we'll look at increasing building fees.
Okay.
Because we give up 70 to 80,000.
All right, so if we go with the 8%, which is the top line of it, at that point, we're gonna have a deficit budget on
192,700 if you went with the officers and the code enforcement officer. So almost 200,000.
That's
and
including.
of that
That's
100.
including them. If you
That's
keep
including.
all
So if they're
3.
taken out, this is
It's
86.
different than what.
That we're.
Yeah, so if you went with the 8% and you didn't have the officer door code enforcement, you'd still be at negative 86,000. And if you kept, my recommendation would be to keep the 2 officers, which is actually only 1.25, because we're gonna hire them in staggered time. But at 1.25 officers and at half-time code enforcement, you're at a negative 192 at the 8%.
Let's just start a discussion on tax rate. And see what is polling the council and see, I mean, nobody's going to de minimis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's
Okay,
correct.
We're
I think we're all in agreement.
I think we're looking at 8 versus 11 at this point, but I'm looking at 8 versus 11.
yeah.
Warren,
No way to go below 8 in my estimation.
Yes, sir.
these numbers are just a little bit different than what I picked up last week. Is that correct? That's
Yeah,
correct.
These are the live numbers. So what you're looking on there is old numbers. We had to put like the single audit and stuff in there.
So again, under
These are the live ones. If you chose.
8% with 2 additional officers, we have a deficit of 111,000. Am I reading that correctly?
If you subtract, no, if you didn't have the 2 officers, it would be at a deficit of 111. And then if you took out the code enforcement person also, this
Right,
has
okay.
the code enforcement. This one has all 3 of them knocked out.
Okay,
If we kept all 3 of them, then we'd be a deficit of 192.
thanks. I can't read that
And
number.
that shows
Okay.
that for Lauren's choice, or the 11% would be at a deficit if we kept all the people, the 2 officers and the code enforcement, we'd be at a deficit of 109,675, which Lauren's telling you that we could probably get close to almost balanced budget with the things that he was mentioning earlier.
And remember, this is a 2-year goal, so we're not gonna get, I'm gonna be honest with you, unless you want to go 12 or 13%, you're not gonna get.
Well,
the balance budget this year.
we just did a poll.
We want to get close.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so, I'm more in favor of the 8%.
I'll start with where I am on this, and I've thought about it a lot. I don't think I can support any new hires while we have a deficit. That's where I'm at. And I don't think I can consider anything over 8%. That's where I'm at. With everything that all the information I've had at my disposal so far.
Can I mention one thing for y'all? I did a little research real quick today before we came in here. I tried to find some other cities that we were remotely close to our size, to see where they're at and what kind of rate they're going at to help y'all. So,
Is that
well,
what this
that's
is?
an old one. That's,
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
that's an old number, I think 2017 or something, 17, 18. So this is actual live of what they're gonna with now. Now, I went with Wimberley. They have not decided if they're gonna go above their voter approval rate, which a voter approval rate is a 3.5% over their NNR rate. Cottonwood Shores, which is kind of out by Austin somewhere, it's a little postage stamp of a city.
Never heard of it.
It's
outside
west,
Oh,
yeah, it's west. Florida.
okay, well, it's somewhere over there. So they're small, and they're actually going 9.9 above their NNR rate. They're going 9.9. And Burnett is going at 9.48 above their NNR rate. I tried Bandera, they're doing fine, so they're gonna be close to their NNR rate. But I at least had 2 cities that went above the 8%. They're at one's almost at 10% and one's at like 9.5.
So what she's talking about is how much they're going over, to try to balance their budget. What you have here, this page, is what the written part that I have was based on 21 here, which is, so Lano was at 52 cents per $100 valuation, Vernon 61 cents, Grant Shores 59.8, Cottonwood Shores is 50, Cottonwood Shores 53 cents, Pass is at 30, almost 34 cents, and Johnson City almost at 40 cents. You can see that
Right here.
this community's on the lower end.
Well, we are, but we can't correct it overnight.
Well, sure, I get it.
Right.
That's why we have all the
Last year we
options.
didn't do anything.
Right, but,
Last year we didn't do anything.
but, and
We should have.
and I don't know where we stack up on this, but this year has to have been an unprecedented increase in the appraised values. So and the taxpayers are cognizant of that. They know they're getting, even if we keep the rate the same, they know they're getting a tax increase unless we lower it to the no new revenue rate. I mean,
No, I think this, on a homestead, is it limited?
So let me explain again. Right now, we're at 35 cents. If you, let's go back to.
The top part of that.
Yeah, like the top part. Went to 8%, then the actual. I know I looked at
The
this.
difference between 8% and 11% on the year value of our house is $45 a year or $3.75. Or 93 cents a week. And the difference between 8% and 11% on the $250,000 house is $6.25 a month, or $1.56 a week, or 22 cents a day. So those are the differences.
They're set, they're at the top.
And for what it would affect the individual homeowner versus what it will do to the bottom line. for the city.
So the 8% would keep you at basically the 35 cents. So if you did the 8%, that would keep you at 35 cents. Now, I will say this, based on trying to get our budget balanced within 2 years, did 8% this year, probably looking at 7% next year. If you bit the bullet this year and went to 10 or 11%, you're probably looking at real close to that 3.5% next year. So it is, and I guess I'm trying to get as close as possible to balance the budget because we have discounts. I don't know what's going to happen next year. I was looking at what we have this year. So if there was that's why we're kind of going through all this now.
And I think what I'd like for us to do is to look out, what I would like to do is to look out more than 1 year. Because we know what we're facing, and we know what's coming and what we're trying to do. And so it's part of the 2-year plan. And like Warren said, we either go a little more this year and a little less next year, or we go less this year and more next year. And so it's just,
Well, again, I'm comfortable with the 8%. I mean, I'm not trying to be, like Warren, I guess Warren said, you don't know what council will look like, next year and who will be here or whatever, but I'd rather just average it out over equally. If it takes 8 and 8, then we do 8 and 8. But I'd rather do that than do, an 11 and then have a new council that says, well, we couldn't do 11 again. So I'm of the mind to go 8.
So there is a possible compromise deal that we could look at. One of the things I want to do is I don't want to lose both officers and the code enforcement, or excuse me, the community compliance officer who really didn't make a lot of strides with cleaning up the community. The possibility, if you look at 5 different scenarios, but you could do something like instruct staff to do 9% and then just instruct us to hire that officer in say March or April, and then you're really looking. So I'm fine.
Well, we'll do too. I mean, this is I'm trying to do what's best for the city and for the citizens. And, you know, you've got to have, we want to retain the people we've got, and we've got lots of challenges before us. You know, I understand what Rodney's saying, you know, I could agree to 8%, but I don't want a deficit budget, but I think a deficit budget is gonna be in our future for next year. Unless we have some windfalls. You know, I would look at maybe keep our part-time and just go to one
Yeah, I know, I'm
officer.
gonna use it. I can hardly see this.
And, you know, still pick him up mid-year or something like that.
Okay.
I would, again, I try not to get so hung up on the percentages, but looking at what it means to a household. And the difference in terms of what that means. And when I look at $3.75 a month to be able to get a second officer or code compliance and everything you need, that's on a $150,000 house, and $6 a month on a $250,000 value house. That's the difference that we're looking at between funding what we need with a minimum deficit versus not. So because percentage is always like, oh my God, it's 8%. Well, you know, a difference between 8 and 11, that 3% difference is $3.75 a month. And that's just not